Welcome to the 6th episode in a 78 video series on the cards of the tarot. If you've been here before and want to skip the intro, as usual, I'll place a timestamp down below. Otherwise, using these 12 decks, as they are the ones I currently have, we will go through each card looking at the difference between the decks and talking about how both artist rendition and reader interpretation of the card can alter its meaning. I will also be sharing a few of my personal interpretations along the way, as I use a mix of intuitive readings as well as taking into account the more traditionally assigned aspects of the card. More information on the decks will be found below in the description box, as well as any links to Kickstarter or Etsy if they were purchased from there. Otherwise, you can be free to assume that they were purchased on Amazon, gifted, or purchased from my local mom and pop witch shop. Like in previous videos, I've thrown in a bonus card from the Spirit Halloween Store novelty deck. I feel that these novelty decks can have value in a reading. And if you haven't already done so, check out my card flip through of the Arcane Bullshit Tarot deck. It's an attempt at ASMR, but I've included a text review of the deck in the description of that video as well. Consider this your warning for sexually explicit material and the occasional foul or coarse language. I currently use two not safe for work tarot decks, and they are 1. The Tarot of Sexual Magic. I consider that softcore, meaning lingerie and romanticized pictures of lovemaking. Eros Tarot, however, I consider hardcore. Just take my word for it. While this series is intended as a basic overview of tarot, which in and of itself is not sexual in nature, these two decks very much are. I will not be talking about the meanings for reversals, meaning that the card jumps out or is pulled out upside down during a reading. However, I have provided in the description a link to biddytarot.com, which offers an excellent breakdown of why you should and shouldn't read reversals. Check it out. I'm not sponsored, just a fan. You don't need to memorize the meaning of every card for every deck you own. Just know that the more you use your cards, the more fluent in their language you will become. Today's card is the Hierophant. I have to admit that the meaning of this card never sticks in my brain. When he turns up in a reading, it's like... So let's take a look at this card before we look at any booklet descriptions about him. He's obviously a religious figure with two acolytes, parishioners, kneeling at his feet in what I assume to be supplication. He is not looking at them though, he is looking straight ahead as if centered in his power. There are two keys at the bottom of this card, which we saw in a few of the High Priestess cards previously. To me, I get the feeling that these keys unlock the doors to a higher spiritual evolution. I also get the phrase keys to the kingdom when I look at this card out of context of any reading. The Hierophant himself is decked out in robes and accessories of his authority. There is a formality about him that is very ritualistic in nature. The Golden Art Nouveau booklet states that the Hierophant is the power of religious authority, dogma, tradition, and the laws or morality. It also says that there are two supplicants, yay me for getting that word, kneeling before him. And for those of you watching who may be turned off by the overt religious imagery, this is said to be a very positive card. It is about a spiritual teacher or mentor who will inspire self-forgiveness and offer a fresh start free of shame and guilt. Depending on the question asked and the cards that precede and follow, of course, this could be a spiritual teacher or mentor entering the querent's life or represent the querent themselves. Remember, querent is just the person asking the question. Now, in the Gilded Tarot, it shows us that this Hierophant is alone, as if walking to or from somewhere. It also looks like he's having a silent debate with himself, complete with hand gestures, and boy, can I relate. No keys this time, but he has his staff. He is also standing in front of a stained glass window, and the moon is high above him. In previous readings, we learned that the stars and moon represent tuition, but in this case, it represents that heavenly divine connection. In the Easy Tarot Handbook, we are told that the heavenly knowledge, the moon, is filtered through the stained glass window to the Hierophant. It also tells us to look at the hands of his as one is raised as if to heaven and one is pointed down to the earth, with the Hierophant acting as a conduit in between. The book also reinforces the spiritual and mentor aspect of this card as well, and goes on to say that this is representative of a large formal institution like a hospital, a church, obviously the government, and places of education. But I don't get that by looking at this card immediately. But it's not hard to make that leap from religious figure to church to the mega conglomerate that is religion today. It's a business, and it's got its hands in all these little pies, from schools to governments. The everyday witch Hierophant goes in a totally opposite direction, though. Where once there was formality, there is informality. Religious dogma gives way to a more organic flow of teaching and leading. There is a visibly direct method of instruction. She is the direct conduit of enlightenment and truth, and there are no filters of beautifully stained glass windows for that information to have to go through. Now, the Guide to the Everyday Witch Tarot also gives us a new word, hierophany. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but who knows? Which essentially means the manifestation of the sacred, which is just chef's kiss to me. I feel this card is less about seeking or asking for forgiveness and more about the aspect of spiritual evolution and mentorship. The book also states that this could be a sign of a more formal education, whether it's academia or weekly yoga classes at your local holistic center. I even like the first quotes that start this entry and the quotes that end this entry, and they are, "You create your own spiritual path every time you take a step. Listen to those who came before you, but make it your own." And it ends with, "It is about creating a bridge between the mundane everyday life we lead and the beliefs that shape our personal truths." And I kind of dig that. Okay, look at these two very different cards and the energies they have. And the very first thing that popped into my head is that it is very much the difference between "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned," and "Sorry, Daddy, I've been naughty." From a general tarot reading standpoint, it is difficult for me to see the traditionally assigned meaning of spiritual involvement in this card. So let's put this into a sexual context. To me, this card is about a sexual relationship with a person, not necessarily older, but more than likely one who taught someone or initiated someone into a sexual relationship, possibly guiding them into a deeper understanding of what can be shared between two individuals in a positive manner. Of course, when I look at the provided booklet, I'm told that this card is about, you know what? I'm just going to give you the entire description. Support. Before calling on a higher strength, you must protect yourself and be certain that you have support. Your intentions must be clear. Like, okay, support, right. And I can kind of get that if we force our minds back into the spiritual side of the house we saw in the first couple cards. But like, bro, the intentions of the supplicant look like it's to suck the chrome off his trailer hitch. And if you mean support, then I guess he is supporting one woman's head with a gentle and tender hand. So I'm just going to disregard this particular book description and fall back to the sexual connotation mentioned earlier. Also, this guy looks like his favorite saying is, once again, the Eros Tarot strips down the symbolism to the most barest and basest of meanings. The couple on this card are entirely naked, obviously, and the energy of this card is just, it feels like a really nice partnership to me. They are holding hands, and it's soft and it's tender, and it feels to me that this couple takes turn in teaching and leading one another. The forehead touch makes me think of telepathic communication, like they can communicate with each other in their own language and without words. To me, this is about equality, and that when they fuck up, they seek absolution from each other. This booklet also gives a description I find myself disregarding a lot because it says submission to traditional institutions and conformity. I mean, okay, if you want to look through it through a heteronormal lens, sure. Adam and Eve, first man and the woman born from his rib, blah, 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 blah. But his head is bowed more than hers. Her hands are holding his from the outside. Oh my God, he's the one that's seeking absolution from her. She's the Hierophant. Oh my God. As we move to the Jane Austen tarot, not to be confused with the tarot of Jane Austen, which is still sadly out of print, we see Frank Churchill and Emma Woodhouse from Jane Austen's Emma, and they're performing together. Now, the book says this card is about tradition, and a quick glance shows that both characters are in the traditional roles assigned to them at the time. It then goes on to talk about how Emma doesn't trust Frank, and even though she's attracted to him, something seems off. And I feel that the energy or meaning of this card gets a little lost in the story and the connection they're trying to make. There is no aspect of a mentor or teacher to this. Emma may like Frank. Frank may appear to like her, but he's hiding information, and not only from Emma. They don't even get together in the end. It's not a submission to conformity or, traditional roles. Emma ends up with Mr. Knightley, and I forget what happens to Frank because, frankly, I don't care about him. Also, in previous videos, when describing this card deck, I stated that the trump or court cards masqueraded as the major arcana, but apparently they just picked whatever fuck all card was there and assigned a meaning to it, because 5 of diamonds, how does that equate to tradition? Or I'm angry. I'm angry and I'm irritated, and I don't want to be, because my daughter gave me this deck because she knows I love Jane Austen. Woosah. Okay. Speaking of tradition, the Lover's Path Tarot is back once again with the remix. Tradition takes the place of the Hierophant in front of us. I assume they're saying their vows. I mean, kneeling in front of a priest, it's pretty much a trope at this point. The signs in the back held by the cherubs translate to, and as far as I can tell, love and duty. This card does speak more of a submission to traditional institutions and conformity, more than the Eros Tarot card and more than the Jane Austen card. And of course, Romeo and Juliet are both victims of not only young age, but the duty and traditions of their time. In a romantic context, it is possible to take this card as a sort of warning due to the nature of the story of Romeo and Juliet. But again, it would depend on the question asked and the cards preceding and following. We see similar imagery with the Crow Tarot. We have 2 crows standing in front of a third who is positioned in front of the stained glass windows. The key is between them, which represents intelligence and knowledge. And yes, I had to Google that. It can also mean secrecy, as information or things kept behind locked doors. We're back with tradition, only without the insinuated meaning of the Romeo and Juliet vibe. This card, to me, has a more formality of ritual. The booklet for this deck tells us that when this card appears in a reading, it is usually a message that now is not the time to think outside the box and do not take unnecessary risks. It reinforces the spiritual leader aspect and to seek out advice. I would see this card as seeking advice before making any life-changing vows, whether it be marriage or otherwise. With the last card, Urban Tarot gives us the spiritual leader in his entirety. He is above us, but still in reach. He will listen and guide, but he won't sugarcoat anything. A conduit of the divine that is filled with purpose, as evidenced by the heavenly body of the moon before him filtered through the cross. What I like about this card is that it is a mixture of both light and dark, which the artist states is a reminder about balance. As any group we join that has a leader, spiritual or otherwise, can just as easily lead us into fulfillment and understanding as into dogmatic intolerance and ignorance. Which brings us back to the Everyday Tarot and their quote, "You create your spiritual path every step you take. Listen to those who came before you, but make it your own." And on that note, I will leave you today with the following 3 questions. What card shown today stood out to you the most and why? What interpretation of the Spirit Store Tarot deck can you give of the Hierophant? And how does he compare to his counterparts? Thanks for joining me, kids. I appreciate you popping in, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye-bye.